Right, testing one, two, three. Hello, everyone. Hopefully, you can all hear me. My name is Shin. I'm here with Pavillion. Really happy that you're all joining us today. Please, we want to keep this interactive and conversational. So I see a few people have already joined. Tell us where you're coming in from and joining us. If you are here for using win-loss analysis to optimize your sales process, you're in the right place. Really happy to introduce two great speakers today, Spencer Dent, the co-founder of Clozd, as well as Craig Clark, the CMO of Nitrogen. I'm going to kick it over to them to give you all a little bit of introduction, and then just proceed with this wonderful discussion. If you have any questions, just use the chat. We want to keep this conversational and as interactive as possible, and we'll share a little something for you at the end as well. So without further ado, please take it away, Spencer.
All right, let's dance. Craig, excited to chat, man. Well, let's introduce. Why don't you take a second, tell everybody who you are, what you do, why you're awesome.
Well, maybe leave you to the awesome part, but yeah, I'm Craig Clark. I'm currently the Chief Marketing Officer of a company called Nitrogen Wealth, headquartered in Sacramento area of California. This is about I think it's my 21st year in my corporate career, and I've only worked for software companies. I've never done anything else in my career. I've always worked in the marketing department of software companies, and I think it's important for this discussion as my career has gone along. I've worked through several software companies. My kind of span of control in terms of what I work on at the company has increased, and at the moment I think it's becoming a little bit more common. I have, in addition to a marketing organization, a sales development team that rolls up to me as well. So as time has gone on, I've become my role has moved a little bit farther down the funnel, and my interest in things like win-loss analysis has increased as my role has gone down the funnel a little bit.
That's awesome. I love that. I'm Spencer Dent. I'm one of the co-founders of Clozd, a company that specializes in win-loss analysis. We've been around. It'll actually be 7 years next week, and really exciting time to be working in this space. It's a space that if I told you guys 7 years ago, when we started, most of the people that we would call and try to cold call and set up with win-loss, very few of them actually had a clear understanding definition of what win-loss is, which we define as an ongoing systematic approach to understanding why you win and lose sales opportunities. That includes new business, churned customers, et cetera. But today, about 1 in 3 companies that we've surveyed in a recent study we did actually have an ongoing cross-functional win-loss program in place. So it's a new practice relatively, but over the last several years, it's become it's becoming more adopted. And I'm super excited to have Craig here because Craig's one of the executives that we work with that has always been on kind of the front edge of this and adopting win-loss, driving the value that comes from win-loss. So maybe we just start there as an earlier adopter of win-loss and the concept of how understanding why we win and lose deals in a systematic fashion. How did you get started, Craig? What was the aha moment, rewinding years back in your career of why don't we understand why we win and lose better? What was kind of the aha moment of going to figure this out?
Well, it's interesting, Spencer, that you'd say you've kind of been doing this for around 8 years. More than half of that time, I've been working with Clozd. I just realized now. I got started in one of those quirky ways. The company I worked for at the time was a risk management software company, a company called Galvanize. And we had just had a new chief revenue officer join us from another big Pacific Northwest software company called Avalara, and which I believe was an early adopter of Clozd. And we had a problem, a thing that was happening in our go-to-market system. And that was our frontline reps were the messaging was really heating up internally around this competitor that had arrived on the scene, and was suddenly, it seemed like if we talked to one of our sellers, they were just eating our lunch in every deal. Um, and I could see there was this conflict between our product organization and our kind of go-to-market organization that was starting to emerge, because this competitor has risen up out of nowhere, and it seems to be in every single deal, and they were winning some of those deals. And so we needed to get to the bottom of what was really happening in those sales cycles. And I sort of related this challenge to our new chief revenue officer, and he said, "Well, what's our win-loss process?" And we had a few interviews happening here and there. Occasionally, we looked at CRM loss reasons, and competition was starting to tick up. And he said, "Yeah, you should really talk to this company called Clozd." And that's where I was introduced to more of an outsourced and professionally led win-loss program. And just as an outcome of that, I mean, we very quickly determined that yes, this competitor was coming up in a great many deals, but we were losing to them extremely infrequently, and it wasn't nearly the go-to-market headache that it would seem if you talk to someone on our sales floor. And so we didn't need to radically redirect product engineering or something like that, or make a shift in pricing and packaging to compete with them. We really had the dominant product, and we illuminated that with the help of Clozd.
I'm nodding my head because I can, that's just one more notch of stories that I've heard of. The internal echo chamber is dangerous, right?
Yeah.
Like what the reps and what gets surfaced, it's this really dangerous echo chamber. And I can tell you tons of stories of clients running into this exact same problem, where a loss reason in the CRM, or just the water cooler circulating around the sales team is giving you false information that's vibrating and echoing through the org. So it's making it seem like it's much bigger than what it is. And companies are about to make really dangerous decisions, being and over-index on certain competitors or certain missing product features or whatever because of that. Here's just a stat that I'll give the audience here. Remember this stat. At Clozd, we pull your win-loss, we pull the win-loss data that your sales reps self-report into your CRM, into our platform. And then we go out and we actually ask the buyers why they did what they did. On lost deals, 85% of the time, the rep is wrong. And so think about how often you are making a bad decision based off of your CRM win-loss reasons. 65% of the time, they have the wrong competitor. So they have the wrong competitor with the wrong loss reasons, and you're trying to make strategic decisions off that. You can't do it. You're going to miss the boat big time. And in defense of the sales reps, that's not always their fault, right? It's not always their fault, Craig. Like, I'm the Salesforce admin. I structured this way. The first drop down tends to be the one that I have to fill it in so that I can move on to the next deal and save my opportunity, whatever. So that one disproportionately gets filled up. And I think in my head, I will go back and fix it later. And I never do, whatever happens. So that's just,
it's typically a pick list, Spencer.
Yep.
It's a CRM pick list, whatever your CRM provider is. It's typically a pick list. And so the number one item, of course, is often picked just so the rep can move on. But I think, kind of getting into the meat of our discussion, the rep is, even if they do fill it out correctly, is wrong a really, really high percentage of the time. And again, that's not 100% their fault. In my experience, that's part of the time they just don't know because the buyer isn't sharing. In our current organization, the top loss reason is no decision, as I think you'll find for a lot of sales processes. And in those situations, it's super likely, I find at least, that our SDRs or our sellers can't re-engage the buyer. And so they literally don't know why someone has walked away. Was it something they said? Was it something they learned on the website? It's completely a black hole. So I think that's something you can illuminate by moving that out of your organization and having a professional service chase that up.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. So you've done this now at a couple of companies and want to get into nitrogen in a second. But for anybody that's listening to us that is thinking about wanting to set up a best-in-class win-loss program for the first time, what are the pieces of advice you would give them having done this a couple times?
Well, I mean, I think I mentioned this to you, Spencer. I won't do my job without it now. I've just seen that how incorrect, in particular, leadership can be in their assumptions. So I just won't do it without it. But in terms of getting started, I would say look around. Look around your go-to-market or your product and engineering team, and there's probably going to be some assumptions that everyone just takes to be true. And they're probably assumptions that you're making strategic decisions on. So we're winning for these reasons, we're losing for these reasons. This total addressable market would be available to us if we just had this, things like that. Whatever those assumptions might be. And then start small with a win-loss program. Try to just isolate something you believe to be true, and you might even have some good data around it as a baseline, and then see what win-loss uncovers in a small, kind of very focused initiative, but before trying to boil the ocean and just like learn every reason why you might win or lose, fully explore that, figure out what your forward product roadmap might look like. Just give yourself a sense for what you can learn when you point it at something very specific. So start small is what I've always done.
Yeah, super smart, right? Because what happens when you start to expand out the number of companies that you're getting feedback from, the questions are always start to fall. Well, what does this look like for this product or this segment or this region? And so the more you can contain the initial, if you're trying to make an ongoing business case to do this regularly, the more you can contain and scope your initial bite at the apple, the more you'll be able to come out of it and say, we have proven or disproven these hypotheses and assumptions. And you will do both, right? Sometimes it's actually really cool to prove an assumption or an internally held belief that it is correct, because then you can just move forward with that much more confidence as an organization. And other times you'll shed additional light or completely uncover stuff that was not known at all through the process of win-loss. So that's awesome.
The other thing I would say, Spencer, is I have noticed a real tendency, especially for kind of like the CRO sales leader kind of persona, and in particular product in a more of a high-tech software kind of organization, to really focus on why you lose. And boy, I've just have had some really interesting insights from, instead of focusing on why you lose, first really understanding why you win. And that was actually feedback that came back from our own board of directors at Nitrogen Wealth here. Okay, we got it. We understand why you lose, but why do you win?
Yeah.
And sometimes your assumptions around why you win are not correct also. And so that can be some of the most strategic feedback that you can get.
I love it. Right. Understand your winning recipe and then go replicate it, versus just figuring out your losing recipe and try to guess why you can win. Getting both perspectives is really, really important. The losses are so provocative, right? Like, oh man, if we could only figure out how to win that. And it kind of is like they're the ones that get a lot of attention. But when you understand, I find that companies that consistently understand why they win and celebrate that and use it to fuel momentum in the organization, as well as understand why they lose and then make the accurate determination of what they should go change there. Because sometimes I'll give you a great example of the importance of understanding the two, Craig. I once had a client they were totally cared just about why they lost. And we came in, and one of the main reasons they were losing is there was a batch of customers that just hated their pricing model. It was like a user-based pricing model. And it was just like, that is not going to scale with my business. And I didn't like it. And your other competitor didn't have a user-based pricing model, and it felt better to us. Right. Well, they were about to go change their pricing model. Well, when we went and talked to some of the wins actually loved the user-based pricing model. Mm-hmm. And if they would have only listened to the losses, they would have actually potentially damaged their win rate by starting to change things, because it's not a guarantee that will actually win all of those deals. So it's an interesting, you want to get as balanced of a view as you can as you go into this. Any other big picture thoughts for people, just general best practices before we jump into what you've learned recently?
Definitely start small. Definitely start with an assumption you believe to be true, and then see if it's true or not. And then, I mean, you just hit the nail right on the head. I've always solved for an equal proportion of feedback from deals we won and deals we lost. And so you kind of get that balance. If you point it strongly one way or the other, it may tell you the wrong story.
Yeah. You mentioned product sales, how they care a lot about the losses. How have you engaged them as the owner of the program to make sure that you're success up front as you're starting these programs, to make sure that you guys are successful?
It's a great question. I guess over the years, because this is my third time working with Clozd, third successive organization, I guess I've learned the way to start is really to start at the top. And so making sure that everyone on the executive leadership team has access to the full readout of what you're gleaning from your win-loss program. And I would just invite them straight into the Clozd, the portal, or right into the user interface, so you can read the reports, yes, but also see the summary patterns and trends forming. So making sure they have access, and carving out time to actually talk about the patterns at the executive leadership level. I don't know. I have just found that is like reading the tabloids for every executive leadership team I've ever worked with, and they are delighted to start sharing that feedback within their own teams, and they come at it with an educated, very enlightened and engaged perspective, and so their managers and their team leaders are taking that on board as well, and then I found that it's most valuable if you can continue to encourage consumption of win-loss analysis all the way down to the absolute front line of your organization, right down to the individual sellers, the customer care and customer satisfaction-oriented teams, and definitely individual product managers, and if you have that kind of persona within your company, they often will notice patterns in things that someone who is used to looking at things from an executive leadership perspective might not notice, and they can add a lot of value in interpreting what you're seeing. So start high and then spread as widely as you can. It has worked for me.
Yes, I love it. So data point for the audience here. Companies that have ongoing cross-functional win-loss programs get a much bigger return on their investment in win-loss. And we have this state of win-loss report that you can actually go read the surveys from companies. It's a survey where we surveyed several hundred companies. I think it was 600 or 700 about their win-loss programs and the status. And companies that are doing this in an ongoing fashion and spreading it broadly, like you're talking about, they get more value out of it. And because one of the things that I think is sometimes misunderstood is that win-loss, when it gets applied in a company, I'll give you like an example of like where you're going to set yourself up for failure. It's owned and run by the sales team within Salesforce. No one else knows why or how it's being run. And then on a quarterly business review, the sales team then aggregates stuff up and goes and tells the product team everything that's wrong with the product, the marketing team everything that's wrong with messaging. And all of those people are saying, wait, who's saying this? The sales team? I don't believe you. Scrap it. Or it's done by a marketing team and a competitive intelligence person, and they are holding on to the insights and worried about how they fill in their battle cards and not worried about how do they share that feedback broadly, because people are going to be able to interpret it, to your point, and glean better insights based on their role. And so it doesn't get to the level it needs to be for executive and cross-functional digestion and internalization, and to get the value out of it. And ultimately, the craziest part about win-loss is you can use a win-loss feedback to coach an individual rep. You can use it. You'll find deals that are like, man, that's a win-back opportunity, and you need to, like, there's very tactical things you can do, but it can also be used to do things like you are doing at Nitrogen, of thinking about how you brand your company and what your overall positioning should be and what your product roadmap should be and all those types of things. So it can be consumed and applied across different components of your business, but only if you share it across up and down the org chart and across the functions to get that value, which is really, it's always been surprising to me how we find out stories of how clients have gotten value out of Clozd. So maybe we jump into Nitrogen. So maybe tell this group that this can be a case study for people. Tell us the story of how you brought this into the company.
It's an interesting case study. I mean, having worked with Clozd in now this is my third organization. Just a little bit of backdrop, I think, to put it in context. It's a software company, a mid-sized software company in the growth stage, I guess you would say, focused on the United States as a target market. And we make software for wealth management. So software for financial advisors to do their job better. And I joined the organization almost 2 years ago now. And before I had joined, I had started to hear the tales of what was going on. The reason they were looking for a new chief marketing officer is because they wanted to change the trajectory of what was going on in the company. So they had started to ply me with all these patterns that they believed to be true. And one of the things that struck me immediately was that the company has an unbelievably wide range in its target market in terms of the average selling price. Makes a product for kind of like a prosumer that's an individual financial advisor could buy, just almost one notch up from e-commerce for like $5,000 a year, all the way up to clients that pay well over $1 million a year. And name a big bank or a wealth management company in the United States, probably a customer of Nitrogen Wealth. And so there was this massive gulf in terms of the two different marketing and product development and sales motions required for these two target markets, kind of a prosumer and then very much an enterprise purchase. And the company had been in business for about 10 years, and it had come out with this amazing feature. It'd be boring for this audience to describe it, but basically this feature was so hot that it had driven insane growth in the first 10 years of this company. But like any good software company, had continued to build and build and build and build, and millions of dollars are poured into engineering every year. And the huge hypothesis and the assumption that the leadership team was making was that the company was still perceived as a vendor of this first feature that it had, like, just to give you a terrible analogy, it's like Salesforce.com only made like contact management.
Right.
Like, imagine that. Okay. So that's the hypothesis that the leadership team has. And it was a deeply held belief that the market had not internalized or viewed the company as a vendor of all this dearth of other functionality that had built along the way. So the long and short of it is, we started looking at loss reasons. We started looking at the types of deals that we were getting into, and it became clear that this pattern was starting to look a bit true. And that's when we engaged Clozd. And the net of it is one of the biggest strategic decisions that we've made based on our work in terms of win-loss at Nitrogen Wealth was proving that hypothesis to be very accurate. And in fact, the greater financial services industry regarded our company as like a vendor of this one little feature, and they were only willing to pay this much for this feature, and that is it. And so we ended up literally rebranding the company and repackaging all of the products in order to just break free of this assumption that the market had about us. And ever since then, we've more than doubled our average selling price for the platform, and it was completely unlocked by changing or breaking that association between the kind of brand and this one feature that we had built more than 10 years ago.
Almost like the buyers didn't know everything that you had on the menu because they only thought of the one thing that you were known for.
Yeah, you're known for pizza, and nobody believes that you can also make a seafood dish over here, and so we couldn't charge for it.
Interesting. So that's an awesome insight. And now you've increased your ACV. You're selling bigger contracts. Your win rates are going up. What as you
They're actually not, Spencer. I should that was another key part of our program. We won a lot. Like our win rates were crazy. When I first joined the company, they were in the 50% range.
right?
Like 50. We put a deal into the pipe, we win it half of the time, which is amazing. And so the goal was actually, as we moved up in terms of the selling price, was to maintain these crazy rates.
Right.
And so we are still here a year on from that rebranding. We are still winning an enterprise deal more than 30% of the time, and we're still winning that prosumer deal, like the solo advisor, financial advisor purchasing the product. We still win those deals over half of the time, and I just don't think we could have navigated that if we hadn't known in huge detail how those buyers navigate through our sales process.
Yeah, I love it. So let me double click on this. So you have this assumption that that's this core product. We need to rebrand so that we can sell more features. That's not just as simple as like, hey, we changed the slide in our slide deck and we changed some things in our product and on our website. You had to involve the sales team from an enablement standpoint. I'm sure you had to involve the product team. What are some tips for folks on how you manage this process of change to get the value out?
Well, I could give you a whole an hour's case study branding a software company.
Yeah.
But I would say one of the things that win-loss analysis gives you as a person who's trying to drive change in an organization is dispassionately collected data. So instead of having an assumption or a hypothesis or some hunch, you can kind of come to the various groups you need to engage with data that illustrates why you're doing things. And sometimes they will immediately understand. Sometimes you need to kind of make a little bit of campaign of enabling them with that data. But I found that in order to kind of get the inertia going and start down the path of driving a big change like that, you share the data, and you share the data pretty early, and give everybody that's you're going to move their cheese, I guess, as part of a big change. You give them access to the data, and you keep them in the loop as the changes are playing out. So it's
Yeah.
what I found is not successful is don't share the data. Show up one day with a beautiful presentation that illustrates what you're about to do to them, and then tell them about it. Like that, I have never met a sales manager who enjoyed that.
Right. Right.
So, the more you can share insights into why you're doing what you're doing and why, and ask for their feedback on it. That's just proven to be a good process.
Yeah. Bringing them along in that journey. I think one of the things, as a win-loss vendor, right? One of the things that people ask us all the time for is, well, do you guys make recommendations? Do you tell us what to go do? And I oftentimes will kind of push back and say, look, we can help diagnose your challenges. We can help diagnose what the buyers are saying. It's really dangerous. I mean, this is coming from a former management consultant. I spent years doing big strategy consulting. It's pretty dangerous to have somebody go talk to a handful of your buyers. Even if I go talk to 100 of your buyers and come back and start telling you all these ways that you need to change your business versus telling you in detail, this is what they are saying and how often they are saying it and what they care about and why you're winning and why you're losing. And then to your point, that allows the sales leaders, the marketing leaders, the product leaders to be brought along. Another thing that I think you alluded to this, Craig, but I think it's useful for people to understand. One of the coolest things to see is when clients get this feedback and they start to act on it, and then they keep a pulse on win-loss. They don't do win-loss as a project to inform this. So, hey, let's go do this big rebrand. But then they keep a pulse on it. And as the program continues to run, you start to see the feedback change. It's been one of my favorite things to see with clients.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's another kind of big strategic learning I've had over the years is initiatives and projects, just as a general concept, at least in a software organization where change is pretty much constant. Um, they tend to result in a one and done kind of result. Whereas if you approach it from an ongoing monitoring and evolution perspective, it's never started or finished. It's just on. Um, that has yielded the greatest results because then you can sort of track the change over time, and it's a bit more scientific when you come back to making another big pivot, which we have done at numerous organizations. You make that big pivot, it's because you kind of have the baseline, and it's not like you swooped back in and helicoptered in and did another project.
Yeah.
So I think that very much applies to win-loss analysis, especially in win-loss analysis, because you
Yeah.
will notice patterns changing over time as your products change, your sellers change, your marketing positioning changes, pricing changes.
Yeah. New competitors come in. Like the analog I would give people that are listening to this, we're talking about win-loss. It's a very B2B application, right? Of feedback, like understanding why people are buying you and not buying you. The analog I would give you that I witnessed in my career is what you saw happen in B2C environments with customer experience. So my background, I worked for Bain & Company. Bain & Company are the creators of Net Promoter Score. So rewind 15 years ago, and Bain is doing Net Promoter Score projects for companies where they're coming in and doing exactly what you're talking about, swooping in. Hey, we went and measured your customer loyalty, and these are the things that drive loyalty, and these are the things that we think you should go work on. Great, awesome executive team, double thumbs up. They leave, Bain leaves. 6 months later, they want to know, did it work or not? So they call Bain back in to do another follow-up study, and they're not sure. It's kind of hard to figure out why it did or didn't happen. So what happened in that space, you saw this, all of you have seen this in your life as a consumer over the last 15 years. You now get how satisfied are you surveys after almost any interaction, flight, hotel, Amazon purchase, whatever. Well, after I was at Bain, I went to a company called Qualtrics, and I saw this evolution firsthand there of it going from being one-off projects to being ongoing programs. The same thing is happening in win-loss. It's just it's a little bit behind because B2B industries are a little more complex to get this type of feedback in because the buyer isn't an individual, it's more of an entity and understanding it. But your exact point is key. The push and what you're seeing is this push to ongoing regular programs because that's how you can monitor it. That's how you can stay on top of it. That's how you can stay out in front of your competition and have a really strong strategic viewpoint on what you need to do to keep winning within your market. It's pretty awesome. Any other takeaways from this recent implementation of win-loss that if you were talking to yourself a couple years ago before you stepped in, you'd want to know?
I can give you a little case study of the ongoing monitoring having some benefit. So kind of related the story of making the decision to rebrand a 10-year-old company and take quite a big risk doing that, which was good. But because we carried on monitoring and we carried on testing the pulse of win-loss, we are starting to learn that our pricing and packaging is not fully optimized for those two. Way back when I was telling you about the two radically different target markets.
Yeah.
What we have gleaned is that there's a lot of crossover between those two worlds, and over the history of the company, we have solved for kind of a hybrid between the enterprise buyer and the individual or small wealth management firm buyer. And so we are literally later on today, we're embarking on a significant rewrite of our pricing and packaging, because we want to separate those two worlds more cleanly and really optimize our packaging and pricing for those two quite different worlds. And it was super hard for us to differentiate between the features and functions and value and price point that each of those two targets were willing to pay, and the type of persona within them that we needed to be talking to get a deal done. So a huge input into our again, a fairly strategic change, shaking up pricing and packaging to optimize for a different addressable market is something we're literally doing right now as a result of ongoing win-loss analysis.
Yeah. That's awesome. And maybe tying two things together, two concepts, the concept of application of there's two different segments of your market. Going back to the original point, if I'm getting started, I might start smaller, right? And scope things to only try to figure out what's happening with this group or this group. But as your data set grows, this is really valuable for people to think about early on in their programs. Making sure that you have the metadata and the context around the feedback that you're receiving so that as your data set grows, you can say, wait a second, any good win-loss analysis will lead to these questions. What happens when I look at it by this segment versus this segment? So that later on you can actually, wait, this question's coming up. We already have the data. We've already collected it over the last 6 months. We don't have to go start a new project and figure it out. We already have a lot of this information that we can start to move on, and we don't have to wait 3 months to get smart again. You're on the pulse of win-loss and kind of technology, how to consume it, how to share it, how to do that. What are some of the things that you feel like are near-term futuristic elements of win-loss that are going? We've talked about some of these, but what are some of the ones that make you most excited?
There are two, Spencer, that I think are definitely going to revolutionize the whole sport of win-loss. One of them is everything we sort of talked about up to this point. Most of my experience with Clozd has been in the classic full-blown interview has been conducted, which works well in a B2B environment for sure. And you have maybe a high average selling price, and you win or lose, you work a relatively small volume of deals. We are a great case study of a company that is in a B2B environment, but where we do a very large number of deals.
Yeah.
And yet I still want to get fairly granular look at the patterns in our sales process. And so something that you have come out with, which I greatly enjoy, is just the concept of an options for gathering that data in two different ways. Super quantitative surveying, but using the dispassionate win-loss kind of approach of Clozd, but also like a video-based interview where someone can step through the same kind of cut down list of questions, and provide attestation back to you in a video format on their own time. So it kind of eliminates the scheduling and probably makes the conclusion rate or the completion rate of win-loss surveys higher. But I think getting to a higher volume with the rigor of a third-party win-loss provider is definitely going to be a game changer. And then surely generative AI.
Yeah.
We certainly use that in our team today in a different way. Our company literally makes products that incorporate now generative AI, but I think when it comes to win-loss, it can dramatically cut down and maybe make more accurate the process of interpreting the feedback that is coming back from win-loss. I mean, so much of the secret sauce, I think, in Clozd is actually in the exposure to many companies win-loss programs, so the rocks under which it might be worth looking, right? So I think that is very valuable, but I think it might be able to speed things up for you, and I think potentially speed things up for your customer as well. So generative AI is going to make the process of crunching the data and highlighting patterns faster and maybe more accurate, which I think is a real boon for win-loss.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Following on those two things, I think are absolutely awesome. And to give context to the audience on the first one, think of it as like feedback channels.
Mhm.
And the way I describe it to people is, you can survey somebody. That's like, getting a little bit of feedback. You don't want to ask too many questions. They won't fill it out. Even if you ask open-ended questions, they're not going to type you up an essay of why they did what they did. You can interview somebody. That's obviously the most high quality, in-depth feedback you can get. And then there's this new middle ground, which is more of like a video-based interview. Video-based interview is really awesome. It's convenient, depending upon how your buyers, what their jobs are. Your buyers might be, for example, a dentist or a restaurant manager or a construction worker that doesn't sit in front of a Zoom camera all day. They would benefit from that feedback mechanism because they don't have to schedule time, set it apart, and go find a computer to sit at. Whereas enterprise buyers, executives, more of an interview, very SMB, more of a survey. But I think what you're nailing, Craig, that is new and interesting, and we're seeing a lot of clients do this, is you want to match the feedback channels to what your pipeline looks like. Some companies have really transactional deals, and it's like overkill. If like I had 2 phone calls with you and then we never spoke again, and then you asked to talk to me for 30 minutes, that would feel a little bit weird, versus if you had 10 phone calls with me and it was a year-long sales cycle, it was $1 million deal. Like I will feel almost a professional obligation to get on the phone with you and explain why I did what I did. And the opposite's true too. If you spend a year trying to sell to me and then you send me a survey, it feels so impersonal and petty. And so making sure you match the feedback channels to the composition of your pipeline is important. We have some clients, all they do are $1 million deals, so they're just interviewing. We have some clients, they have very transactional deals. All they're doing is flex interviews and some surveys. We have other clients that they run the gambit. and they can meet their customer base how they should, and their potential buyers how they should with the right feedback channels. So huge, important thing that a lot of people that are doing win-loss for the first time, they either think basic, let's do a simple survey, or let's do some interviews, but there are more ways to gather the feedback. Number one. Number two, on the generative AI front, I'll just give everyone this example. Our own internal data, not our clients' data, but Clozd, we run win-loss programs for ourselves. We run our own win-loss program. And we have been testing and working with these different generative AI models to help us. Everybody says AI, but it's like this bland term that can mean anything. We've been using it as an application to summarize lots of quantitative data that we are hearing from our own buyers about why they do and don't choose Clozd. And it's actually pretty phenomenal how accurate it can be if you have a big enough data set. And what I see, the way I see the world moving is, as the collection becomes less expensive and more scalable, the generative AI will help with the analytics side of it. The other thing I would tell somebody who is thinking about this from a how to use thinking about this from a qualitative versus quantitative data, step back. I don't know anybody who really enjoys filling out surveys, like quantitative surveys, filling in radial buttons. I don't know if you know anybody like that, Craig, but I don't know anybody like that. Because and if you actually just think about the process, you ask somebody a question, you give them a set list of potential responses, they fill it in, and then you go aggregate that across your whole population that you're collecting feedback in, you add it up, and then you're trying to interpret what that means. So I'm taking how I feel and what I think and turning it into a button. And then you're adding up the buttons and trying to extract it back out to what everybody thinks and feels. I'm not sure how generative AI is going to change how we do research at large as humanity. But the fact that you can just ask somebody straight, what do you think? And then have technology that can summarize that across huge pools, I think you're going to get better information, more information. It will be more engaging. And we've been surprised by how much people are willing to share qualitatively that you just in less time than they will share quantitatively, just because it's more engaging and more fun, and it's less work for them as the participant. So
I've seen that too, Spencer. I mean, just as a corollary to that, people like to be asked. People like to be asked, and it actually reflects well, I think, on your own brand.
Yeah.
If there's a very professional follow-up to the sales process, I have seen that actually reflects positively on your own brand, and sometimes you get those win-back deals showing up out of the sky there, that you didn't expect.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Totally. What haven't I asked you about that I should have asked you about? What haven't we covered? That any closing thoughts for the folks?
I think we covered it pretty well. I'm obviously a fan. I think whether you work with Clozd or you don't, you're probably making some assumptions about how things happen in your product development, your sales and your marketing today. And I would just really encourage you to not deny yourself the extremely interesting and impactful results that you can generate by just trying it out. I think you'll find once you start, it's pretty hard to stop, and you realize the decisions that you've been making up until that point, you probably just didn't have the full information to make them. So I really would encourage everyone on the line here to check it out. Clozd is definitely an amazing provider of this. I've had good success myself.
Yeah. So any of you, thanks, Craig. You're awesome. Any of you that are thinking about doing this, here's some resources for you. Let me share this. Hope everybody can see this. Basically what you're looking at is scan this QR code. If you scan that, you'll be able to get access to state of win-loss report. That basically is like laying out how different companies are approaching win-loss today. ROI calculator, ways for you to think about how you get value out of win-loss. Craig mentioned win-back opportunities. We find about 1 in 10 losses actually raise their hand and say, I actually am still interested, but our budget got cut right now or something like that. Can you reach out to me at this point? Let alone the ROI of making major strategic changes and lifting your win rate. There's small value that adds up quite a bit. Whether you're interested in trying to do this yourself or use a third party like Clozd, we have a demo video you can see. So you can kind of see what good looks like, right? Like this is what you should be shooting for in terms of seeing individual feedback, let alone aggregating feedback. And then what's the date today? It's March 26th, end of the quarter for a lot of you. Your company's probably going to win or lose a deal that's going to be painful or super exciting. If you're trying to make the case for why you should do this, let us go do a free interview for you. We're happy to do that. It proves that, to Craig's point, one of the most valuable things you can do is try this out and get started small. That's the smallest way you can get started. Go get 1 or 2 data points on deals and you'll see the impact that comes through. So thanks everybody for taking the time. We appreciate it. If at any point you could ever use help from us, I always do this and our marketing team loves it because it makes attribution really hard. But if I can ever help you, just reach out to me. My email is spencer@clozd.com, CLOZD.com. I'm happy to talk shop and answer people's questions about how they're approaching this and be a resource to you as you start on the journey. Craig, thank you.
Anytime, Spencer.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.